delighted to have everyone here, and thank you very much for accepting our invitations. This is our first executive forum, and we're looking forward to continue these, and we welcome your feedback towards the end of this. What I'd like to, at this point, I'd like to introduce the founder of Strategic Partners, Ross Bauer of Bauer Benefits. That's very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning, everyone. I just want to take a minute and tell you a little bit about the Strategic Partners. We started in 2014, and our mission is to help our clients get closer to corporate excellence. Right now, there's about 12 of us in the group, and we all do something different, adding value to companies. And it's just our mission to help our companies become more successful. So today we've got two great speakers, and I'm going to give it back to Frank and let him take us through that, and I'll sign off later at the end. Thank you again.
Very good. Thanks, Ross. So before I get started, I'd just like to very quickly introduce the Strategic Partners. I'm just going to kind of go through the list, and if you're a strategic partner, you can wave or acknowledge it. So Ross is the owner of Bauer Benefits. We have Steve Sabian, who's the owner of Go Energy. We also have Barry Connors, headhunter with Connors and Associates. David Cameron with Cortec. We have Jeff Bradshaw with Profit Professionals, Colin Shantz with Coppertree, Rob Matlow with REM Solutions, myself with Newman HR, Ray Freckleton with RNC Chartered Accountants, Steve Gadbois with Steve Gadbois Law, and Gib Wood with Synergy Solutions. So we're delighted to welcome you here. And what I'd like to do at this point now is to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Keith Miles. So Keith Miles, MBA, he's an experienced management consultant, author, conference speaker, and leadership coach. Keith also often speaks for the Chief Executive Group's U.S. conferences. He has two books available on Amazon, The Improvement Box, which is a guide for improving team performance, and a book I find fascinating. It's called The Lincoln Authority, and it's a guide for leadership behaviors based on the work of Abraham Lincoln. So fascinating work. So Keith is going to be talking to us about leading in time and providing practical insights into how to lead and coach your team in less time with greater influence. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and Keith is going to direct us a little bit in terms of how to manage our screen so we can watch his screen. And just a final comment, if you haven't put your name in the chat box, identify yourself, please go ahead and do that at any time. And we'll look forward to Keith's presentation. So Keith, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. I'd like you to go up into your top left or right side of your screen where it says Gallery View. And I'd like you to turn that off and go to Speaker View. So if you're all on mute and I'm not, you'll see me and you'll see I'm going to put a few words up here. It's just a lot more fun to be able to gesture and to talk to things, and as opposed to just having a talking PowerPoint slide. So if you can do that, and I'll give you 1 second to do that and then I'll start. So just change it from Gallery View to Speaker View. Okay. All right, so Frank's already introduced me. I love helping people. I enjoy doing that, and I speak often at conferences. But I'm thrilled to be the first speaker for this series that the Strategic Partners is holding. And Ross and Frank, thank you so much for asking me to join. So there's a lot of different people from different backgrounds and different functions. I'm going to give some very practical help, but it's more a little bit, it's not conceptual, but they're very practical. But there are two frameworks that you can use to help lead and coach with less effort and greater influence, as Frank just said. So it's got two parts today. We're going to talk about how you manage transitions, and we've got tons of transitions in every business right now. So this is something absolutely top of mind. How do we manage that quickly, easily? How do we help our people manage their transitions? So the next thing is to multiply influence, and we're going to have lots of time for questions, about 10 minutes of questions. I got 20 minutes now, but let's go through managing transitions. It's really easy. The trouble is that most of us, when we go into a transition situation, what we do is we say, hey, folks, we're terrible here, we're terrible here, we're terrible here. Oh, we suck here. And we need to do this better. So I'm going to suggest that we do this and this and this. And so is that okay? Is everybody on side? Okay, let's go. And that's fine. But what that does is that misses something. And what I'm talking about is that your people need to be brought with you through the transition. And that's what we're talking about. So we're going to talk about time and how you do that. So the first one I call honor their past. And what you need to do is realize that when you're bringing a transition forward into your people, whatever that is, they're not objective. They've built the status quo. And you may think it's terrible, but it's taken effort and enthusiasm and commitment to do that. And they're not going to say, oh, gee, you're criticizing what we do. They're just going to feel that they're not respected because you're saying what I do is terrible. And that's not how they feel about their jobs. So what I suggested, it only takes a little bit of time and it's so easy to do. What you need is to go and research a few things that they have done successfully in the past. So what you say is, hey, they did that. That took tenacity. They did that. Oh, that took commitment. That took extra. That took unbelievable collaboration. And that you want to bring back not so much what they did, but the attitudes that they exhibited when they did those things. So what you need to say is, gang, we have a transition to go through, but you folks have done this and this and this before, and that took tenacity, innovation, a commitment, passion. Can you bring that to us again? I know you have it, but we have another transition to go through. And I know you've done that before. Can you bring that with us? Because I need that again. And that's a respectful way to start the transition. It's so simple. It only takes a few minutes research. And ask to see that again. And I love I have a little maxim that I use, and you can steal. Everyone does. It says, if you honor people's past, they'll let you take them to the future. If you honor people's past, they'll let you take them to the future. And so that's such a simple thing to do, and it comes back so much in benefits. The same way, affirm the present. Just as they're not objective about what the past is, they're also not objective about when you say what they're doing today is terrible. Because in reality, as leaders, their efforts, their activities are actually the product of our leadership. So what we allow to exist and don't exist, that's what happens. So don't be too quick to criticize that too thoroughly. We can say that, hey, the current activities fit the previous iteration of the industry and all those things perfectly, but things have changed. And that's easy to do today. And say, so we need some adjustments going forward. And what you need to find is some of the positives that they do in the current activities. So that's honor the past, affirm the present. Now let's go to the future. You need to depict the future. And often what I see is, as you go down the organizational chart to the frontline people, the rationale for why we're doing whatever change we're doing gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Because we think, oh, they're just practical. They don't need to know all the messy details. I'll just go quickly say, it's for this and this, and off they go. And although you might think that's practical and time efficient, what they feel is disrespectful. And I think it's helpful to create a little bit of a business case that says, here's the reasons and here's the rationale in the industry, these things. So it's not the most time-consuming presentation as you would to a senior executive, but it's a full-blown presentation with all the reasons and the rationale behind it. And then they see that as, oh, you're paying me respect. And what I often see, if you do this, and I've done this with Equifax and across the country and all these things, you give the business case. People come up to you and say, oh, yeah, you're talking about that. But in this one unique situation with this one customer, that won't work. And I think you need to do this instead.
Good morning, Lucas, period.
I'm sorry? So I'm just going to keep going. So what happens is that you need to have a concise program, and you need to arm them with, because they'll come back and give you some suggestions or some omissions that you have excluded from your solution that they can correct with your help, and things can be so much better. So it actually works to good to much benefit to arm them with the detail that they need. Fourth, when engage with half-finished ideas. Now, this is always a problem for those of us who are a little bit technical and come from an expertise. We want to show our people that we really know how to plan and our area, and how to focus the attention and all the things that need to be done. And what we tend to do when we have a change is plan it all out, and it becomes like the Magna Carta, and we ask our people to sign on. And often that's not the best response. And it's actually more work and less effort, it's more effort, and it's less engaging. So what I suggest is, rather than do that, it's not a showcase of your expertise. A transition is an opportunity to leverage their expertise. And so I would invite them in, and I've done this before. I'll give you an example in a second. And I say, gang, we're going to do this because we've decided to do this. We're going to do this. But I got some real questions about how best to do that. And I know you have better process knowledge and more detailed knowledge of the customers and the processes and the systems. If we put our heads together, the implementation would be so much better if we work together on that. Can you help me with that? Because I know it'll be stronger, faster, less disruption. Can you help me do that? Well, I've never seen in 20 years anyone say no, because that's a respectful entry. You invite them in. I remember one time doing this for a client. They were about 80 people, and they were doing a manufacturing and distribution company. And I had a suggestion for how they could reduce their product lead time from about 4 weeks delivery to 2 weeks or under. And I grabbed the senior people in the building for about an hour or two on Friday afternoon. I said, I got this wild idea. What do you think about this? And for 2 hours, they kept saying, Keith, have you thought about? I go, no, I don't know that area as well as you do. What do you think about that? And I said that repeatedly over the Friday afternoon. Monday morning, one by one, those people came to the place where I worked at the client and said, I've been thinking about that all weekend. I got some great ideas. And they totally rocked it. They implemented it beautifully. They beat the competition in Canada down everywhere because their sales jumped because they were delivering half the time than other people. They got bought out by a multinational. The owner made a tremendous amount of money, a tremendously successful transition from every direction. So finally, on this 5-step program here, this framework that you can apply, examine resistance, because you'll see some people hang back. And our tendency, fundamental attribution error, says that we tend to blame the people in the process rather than the process. So what we need to do is realize that often, in my experience over 20 years doing this, when there's people who are hanging back and not doing things, they're often being, it's a symptom of a reinforcing mechanism below the surface that's reinforcing the old behavior. I remember having a client, and he was frustrated. They were doing manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution. And the president was frustrated that a particular product line wasn't getting the inventory levels that they needed to provide the service level, the availability to clients. And he was frustrated. And I was talking to him over lunch, and I said, how long have you been dealing with this? And he said, about 2 years. I said, the people involved are amazing. There's got to be something else. What's behind the scenes? And he goes, well, there's that incentive. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when they make that other secondary product line, they get half the work incentive that they do when they make the full product line. And I said, well, you just told them what's important, and you told them that isn't. Don't expect it ever to be there in the availability of the first line. You need to change the reinforcing mechanism underneath. And you need to adjust that. So realize that a lot of the behavior that we see in our company is already being reinforced somehow. Need to find out what that is and make an adjustment there. So that's this 5-step transition. I've changed whole companies with this framework. So let's go through them all. First, honor their past, because they're not objective. And if you honor people's past, they'll let you take them to the future. Number 2, affirm the present, because they're not objective about that either. And you need to find some positives, because their behavior is what we allow. Number 3 is depict the future. Tell them what the reason and where we're going and what the difference we see, because that's a respectful way to honor their intelligence and their intellect. And you need to do that, and that's respectful. And it also comes back to you in better feedback. 4, involve people with half-finished ideas. It's just less work. It's more engaging for your people. It's more respectful, because you're saying, my boss respects my understanding. It's so much easier, and it's less time, and the implementation's already started. 5, reinforce the behaviors that appear to be resistant are often reinforced. So make some adjustments below, and you'll see that. You can start to do that today, and you can teach your people the 5 steps tomorrow. You know, if we've got a recording of the video, people can play that through, because it's so easy to do. So that's the first step, and I hope you can start to use that in your mind. In my experience, people are going, yeah, I got a place to use that. So let's go on to the second part, and how to use those same principles and multiply your influence, and especially in a challenging time, because we need more impact with less time. So I would say that people as leaders, we tend to jump to measurements, don't we? I've heard it said that if it's not measured, it's not done. Well, I would rather say that if it's not accountable, it's not done. So I had a client one time tell me, I want to open up a new market. I want to open up Pennsylvania as a market for our product. And it's going to take about 2 years to gain entry. And they said, our target is to have that market represent X% of our sales in the next 2 years. And the general manager and the gentleman who was going to be president looked at me and said, there. And I said, are we done? And they said, yeah. I said, who's doing this? And they said, the 2 senior salespeople. But those 2 senior salespeople were each mentoring 15 junior salespeople. They were the 2 busiest salespeople in the entire corporation. And I said, well, yeah, that's never going to happen, because that's a target. So targets are fine, but people don't know what to do differently today to get that unless you tell them. So they're not going to change their behavior, and the urgent's going to beat the living tar out of the important, and this is never going to happen. And they said, well, what do we do? And I said, I have a suggestion for you, and it's what I've used in the past. I say, what does opening up a new market look like? What does opening up a new market look like? What's the pattern of activity that you want to see that depicts or represents progress? Is it one industry breakfast a month in that state? Is it 15 calls to industry leaders in that to ask them how you can make further gains and entrance into their market? Is it a quarterly trade show in that area, in that industry? So you can forget the target. Talk about what's the pattern of activity that you can hold true on a weekly, monthly basis, that you can see progress. Do that. And they did that, and it was successful. So the point here is that what we see is that when we as leaders talk, we often think long-term. And that's part of being a leader, because we have vision. All right. And so here's a C-level executive. I hope you can see this on the screen. It's just a timeline with 1, 2, 3 years and an arrow going right out to the end, and various targets at 1, 2, and 3 years if you can't see that. And we love to talk about targets because we think in terms of achievement, and we know instinctively what to do differently. But your people aren't like that. And what I find after 20 years and 25 years of doing culture change, that as you go down farther in your organization, executives, senior managers, specs, and frontline, that working time horizon gets shorter and shorter and shorter. It's not a matter of intellect. Emergency room doctors are focused on an hour. They want to give a med and see an uptick in results. So it's nothing to do with intelligence. It's a matter that every job has an associated normal time horizon. And if you speak outside that, here's what happens. It's like you're Charlie Brown's parents in the Charlie Brown's Christmas special, where you know what they'll sound like, right? Well, that you can hear a noise, but it's not clear. That's what you're like when you talk about targets and expect them to instinctively know what to do differently, because they don't. What is a more effective way to build influence in less time is to, instead of talking about targets, talk about the daily and weekly actions that are going to result in the target being achieved. That's the key. So that's so important. I call them step forward actions. It's because you're talking about day-to-day actions, whether please respond to that customer service in 4 hours, or do a voice callback to that customer rather than an email, because an email has a very low emotional quotient, but a voice call, even a voicemail, has so much more tone and more welcoming, and it's perceived as higher service. So there's a bunch of things you can do to inject that. I'll get to that in a second. But this is something that's true in the most successful organizations that I know. I had a client of mine who became the top manufacturing person at Toyota. He was tasked with building the first Lexus plant outside Japan, a very daunting task. He's an unbelievably wise and talented executive. When he retired from Toyota, he and I were working on a leadership workshop. And I'll never forget what he said. Here's what he said, and I bring it to you. Keith, remember, it's not the targets, it's the daily improvements. Remember, it's not the targets, it's the daily improvements. What he's saying verbally is what that previous slide said graphically, in that when you focus on the target, people do not know what to do differently today. If you focus on what they have to do differently today, you'll always make the target. It's so much easier because that's the root cause. The root reason that any target is achieved is that you've done something differently. Focus your attention there, hold that accountable, you'll always make your targets. So much more effective. So we tend to use words. We love words. We love inspiration and realize that it has almost no influence on going down several levels in an organization. They are already accountable for so many things and they're paying attention to that. And they love your words, but they don't. I remember one time we made a tremendous difference in a client in there. We asked their leaders to do amazing, sophisticated things like listen to your people, ask them Socratic questions, go to your department meetings, very amazing things. We had made such a difference in one manager that the two staff people grabbed the lady who scheduled our meetings, grabbed her, pulled her in the lunchroom and said, what'd they do to my manager? He's listening to us. He asked our opinion on things. He scared the tar out of us. And she said, no, Keith met with them on Tuesday morning. And he goes, they said, is this just a speech? Is this just a speech? Because around here, speeches only last about 3 weeks. And it's temporary. Because people go back to what they're being reinforced for. So the nice thing happens and then it goes back to normal. That's what you see. You don't want that as leaders. We want a greater influence, longer term influence, leading over time. So what I remember having, it's hard to find an example that all of you can relate to, but I had a small client, about 70 people, manufacturing, warehousing and distribution, doing some fairly cool stuff. They would typically give a strategy speech every year. They would change nothing of the reinforcing mechanisms below. They'd smile, they'd say, we want to do this, and that never happened. So sales was percolating along about 3% a year sales growth, which is nothing. Struggling to release products to market, struggling to make money. So I came along and did exactly what I said. I looked at the senior roles in the office, there weren't that many, and identified 5 or 10 daily activities that need to be different, like the customer service rep phoning people within 4 hours, not the next day. That the product manager who is in charge of manufacturing, that when the product development manager asks for a day to break down the line and test a new product, he doesn't delay them by 3 months because his efficiency rating would get affected. So it was a way to just adjust a bunch of things at the same time. I rolled it out in about 2 hours on a Tuesday morning. It said, here's the strategy that you guys all talk about. We're not going to talk about that again. We're just going to do it. If that's the strategy, if we did this all differently, these few behaviors, we'll achieve that strategy. And if you don't demonstrate these behaviors, you won't get a bonus and you won't get a raise. So these have to be evident in your daily work pattern. That was it. I didn't visit them or talk to them for another 8 weeks. At 8 weeks, I visited and I walked in the front door. The sales VP greeted me and said, this is like drugs, which sort of scared me. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, our customers started to call us about 3 weeks ago. And they said, who are you? And what happened to the company with the same name? There's nothing like, you're not the same. And this VP of sales said, is there a problem? He goes, no, the opposite. You used to answer our inquiries in 2 days. Now it's 4 hours, and we've been testing you for a month, and it hasn't changed. What the H has gone on over there? And he thought that was funny. So I didn't visit that client for another 2 years. So it wasn't me coaching, it was that accountability that I left in place, that if they didn't demonstrate these behaviors that were all made sense and stop these conflicting and contradictory purposes, that if they did that, they'd get a raise. And so after 2.5 years, instead of sales at 3%, sales were 15% a year growth. 4 times the new products were delivered each year. That we figured out on the back of an envelope very quickly that the little difference, the jump in performance, had generated 1.89 million of additional profit in the first 2 years. So from about 3 weeks or 4 weeks of analysis, you can come alongside and do this pretty easily. So it's just finding a few things that are different, and it's often from the core process. You can say, hey, again, I had a big software development client. They were manufacturing software in a 5-step process. It wasn't quite waterfall, it was more agile, but they were, each of the first 4 steps were doing a terrible job, making assumptions, not really high quality, dumping it over to the next group, and finally the last group was the only people that had a target. Well, it didn't take much thinking to say, well, I need to have the same targets for everybody and the same quality gating. And so those kinds of things you can do. You're not defining a lot of things, it's just a few things that they have to do differently. It's not a big, a lot, it's only a few bullet points on a page. It's not a big, and making sure it's written. If it's verbal, it's irrelevant. Solomon said 3,000 years ago, servants cannot be corrected with just words. Though they understand, they won't respond. So it's accountable actions that people are going to listen to. And so, and the really positive thing about this is if you have some suggestions. I've been doing this for 20 years. I have never in my life had one person say to me, oh, you're meddling in my job. Oh, I'm offended. The opposite's true. They go, you're helping me rock my job and rock my contribution. I want to do a great job, because people come to work and they want to do a great job. And by giving them a few pointers, things that they can do differently in a different way of thinking, because you're leaders, you can see that, then they go, oh, okay. So it's a positive thing. So that's what I want to talk about today, and we have 10 minutes for questions and answers. So let me just recap what we talked about. We talked about a 5-step kit that you can use, a framework to help you manage transitions, honor their past, affirm their present, depict the future, engage with half-finished ideas, leave the tactical things for them to work on, and then finally realize that resistant behavior is being reinforced by something. Go fix that, it'll change. And finally, if you stop communicating so much with words are great for you, but for your people, they're looking at accountable actions in that time horizon that they work in. If you communicate with that on paper, don't give this as a speech, because they don't know. So here's the list of the behaviors I need to see and do this differently. Then you get a raise or bonus. I tell you the difference. One person said to me, one leader, president of a company said, anything we put on that page, we got in terms of behavior. Very powerful. So I'm gonna close it up now and listen to you guys talk about questions and answers, and I'll do the best I can to answer them. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Keith. That was terrific. So what we can do now, if you'd like to ask a question, if you can unmute your mic, that's a good way to start, and we'll have a few minutes for questions. If you didn't want to ask a question online, you can ask a question on the chat box, and I'll read those out. Or if we don't have enough time, what we'll do is we can send those to Keith and then distribute them to people afterwards. So I'll open it up for questions, and don't feel shy.
Keith, it's Ross Bauer.
Yes, Ross.
The assignments that you take on, generally speaking, how long are you working with that client?
It's only probably 8 weeks, 12 weeks at the max.
Okay.
It's not, we do, I remember one time I had a client who was losing money for the first time. They had about 55 people, and they were doing high-end sophisticated telecommunications and networking installs, but they were installing it right the 5th time. And so I took their process, and I have a technique that I use that's simple. Took 6 meetings over, just 6 3-hour meetings over 6 weeks. And we revised their process. Their sales order went from a 1.5 pages of vague descriptions to 4 pages of precise checklists. And for the first time in the company's history, they collected all the information they needed to do the job perfectly the first time. And now, so a year later, the owner took me out for lunch in his brand new Lexus Sport Coupe, which he'd bought with a profit. And the next year he bought himself a Cessna float plane, which is $750,000. So although I don't spend a lot of time with clients, the things that we do can fix things for years at a time. So.
Thank you.
Keith, during COVID, have you seen, we've seen lots more change. Have you seen more urgency behind change as we've gone through COVID?
I think that's a great question, Frank. What I see is more tactical change, that they're not making so much large, because the move to remote work has been so pervasive. They're relearning the daily patterns and that rhythm. And so they've been struggling with that. They haven't done as many large-scale change, but but frankly, in the next week, I'm starting a gig with the world's 5th largest mining company. I've got some change stuff we're going to do with them, and so yeah, it's more tactical now, and people are. This change to remote work has been so impressive that the large, if you think about the large tech companies, they're saying, hey, we're going to scale back real estate. I know OpenText is going to cut half the real estate. So this has been very effective. But I think that's what I've seen as the change, is that it's the work pattern has changed as opposed to large scale organizational change. Anyone else want to comment on that? That's fine too.
Okay. Keith, knowing your book on Abraham Lincoln, and we're in a very interesting stage of the world in terms of politics. Can you maybe share just your thoughts in terms of thinking about Lincoln and how he might have addressed some of the challenges that we're seeing in the world today, I guess particularly in the U.S., but without getting too political?
No, I think that, well, I reached back to Lincoln because it's long enough that it wasn't as political. Lincoln learned to be a good leader. He's the most studied person in the world after Christ. So if you make a mistake in a book, apparently there's a whole army of people ready to tear you apart. And a historian of 20 years reviewed my book and said it was excellent. So Louis Lerman used to be CEO of Rite Aid Pharmacy in the States. He reviewed my book for me. But my point about Lincoln is Lincoln learned to be a good leader. He wasn't instinctive. There was a time in his early life where he learned how to speak and to tell stories. His grammar and diction, he only had 3 or 4 years of formal education. He learned everything else by himself. He could quote passages of Shakespeare in the Bible verbatim. But he learned to make fun of people. And at one time, he humiliated a man in a political debate so much, they called, the county called it the skinning of that person. And that person had to leave the county because of shame. And he realized at that point that he could not do that. That was not why he was on the earth. And so he learned to be a good leader. He wasn't a great leader at the start. He was, and as he grew, but he was selfless. It's not a history book. There's only a little couple of paragraphs at the start of each chapter where I refer to the concept that I'm talking about. Leaders need to give, just as in that time horizon, what we're really doing is I had a client one time said, I want to develop these 10 competencies in my leaders. And the person talked about his direct reports as being not very capable when I first got there, the first conversation. So I said, rather than have targets that they're supposed to hit, say, achieve this competency, I say, they're never going to do it. They're working 80 hours a week. They're never going to get there. What is the daily behavior that we can weave into a month but over time that will build that competency? So I created the same type of thing I talked about for those step forward actions. I created a little sheet for the leaders, and it described the behaviors that grow these competencies. Now, the neat thing is that person said, can you help me with my direct reports? They can't do strategy. That was my first conversation with them. So 10 years later, after I've taken and put those people through my step. It's very simple. I just said, do these behaviors or you won't get a raise. It wasn't, and there's just micro behaviors that you can weave into a month. Now, when that hospital network buys a new hospital, the leader that they pick to integrate the hospital from janitor to CEO office is one of the 10 people that I put that program through with them. And so they became the best leaders. So what I say about in the Lincoln Authority is that it's all about leadership behaviors. We can talk about, but the whole book is about 10 or 12 chapters of just few, and each chapter is only 4 to 5 pages. It's absolutely ADD friendly. It's for people like me. And it, as one senior consultant said, there isn't a wasted word in here. There just isn't. It's the most condensed thing you'll ever see. But it's just a way to give the next generation a few behaviors that they can latch onto and be respectful, because we need to be effective and respectful. Sometimes we make the trade-off between those two, and that's what I would like to say.
Very good.
Sorry.
Well, thank you very much, Keith. We're pretty much out of time for questions, but I do want to thank you, Keith. I appreciate your passion.
Well, hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Exactly. And I think the key message I get out of this, and I work with lots of clients on the HR side, is trying to do change. But again, we think about the big strategy number, but it's a daily improvement. So I think that's my takeaway.
That's where they're going to listen. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to sign off and let you guys do your own thing. So connect with me on LinkedIn or through the strategic partners. I'd love to hear more questions that you have. And thanks to you again, Ross, for letting me join today.
Oh, you're welcome, Barry. Thanks for a great time.
Thank you very much, Keith. It's great to see you again. Very good. Well, thank you, folks. I hope you found that interesting. And, Keith's contact information is available if you need it. It's now my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Mr. Corey Boone. So Corey and I have known each other for about 6 years. And Corey is the president of Diversco Propane in Cambridge. He's been with the company for several years. And what's remarkable about Corey is his passion for employee culture and developing a great place to work. And so he's going to tell you about his story and the journey they've gone through, and he's got lots of practical tips in terms of how to get more business results through positive culture. So Corey, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Perfect. Good morning, Frank. I'm just going to share my screen with, I think Ross can take my PowerPoint. Can you see that?
There we go. Wonderful.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, let me just see if I can get it from the beginning. So first of all, I want to say thanks to Ross and Frank for the opportunity to talk to you today about Diversco and the power of our core values. I've been working with Ross and Frank, like you said, 6 years, and Ross for the last 3 or 4 years. So the strategic partnership group that you have right now has been working with Diversco and helping Diversco grow its business. Frank's been a great mentor and associate on the human resources standpoint, and has really helped me drive our core values throughout the organization. Like Frank said, I've been with the company 18 years, actually. 18 years and 5 months, according to my LinkedIn profile. Graduated from Memorial University back in Newfoundland in 2001. My wife and I moved to Ontario looking for work, and took over as controller of Diversco in May of 2002. Back at that time, the company was in propane equipment distribution and scuba equipment, and I was about sales. Also, I manage all of our shared services when it comes to IT, HR, and finance. I'm also a partner in our transportation divisions as well. And I sit on the board of directors for Canadian Propane Association, and I have 3 small kids and a wife, so I've been quite busy. I look at Diversco Supply, it's evolved over the last 34 years. Again, our core business was our propane equipment, a distribution business. We've expanded our business based on our diverse name. That was the original plan. The Diversco name came before the diversity actually happened. It might be a self-fulfilling prophecy from the ownership group, but we've diversified our portfolio into scuba equipment in Canada and the US. We also have a water sports recreation division, and we have a anhydrous ammonia granular fertilizer construction and service business in Western Canada. We also have an automotive packaging division. So when it comes to strategy around why we did this, our propane business had flatlined a little bit back in 2010, and the ownership group was a little concerned that because natural gas was expanding, that we may wanted to diversify our portfolio, and we wanted to get into some different businesses that were different seasons than our propane equipment. So we've done that quite well, and we've really flatlined our overall our business over the last, I'll say, 34 years. Just to give you some stats around a pandemic, Diversco Supply and group of companies have processed 35,000 orders in the last 8 months and have been pretty strong when it came to the essential services that we provide. One of the things I try to do is articulate to our staff is that what we do isn't just about distribution or transportation. If you look at what we've done in the last, I'll say 8 months when it comes to the pandemic, our propane equipment distribution business has supplied heat to homes across the country with providing supplies for those propane marketers. Our water sports recreation division, in a time of a pandemic, has driven family fun in all across the Canada and US by providing people that couldn't go on vacation an ability to kayak with their kids and do other things. So what I try to do is provide purpose and get our staff to understand that what we do isn't just distribution or transportation. Again, our transportation division had traveled 1.8 million miles since the pandemic and brought products all around North America for homeowners. A little bit of background about our ownership group. Two local gentlemen, Robert Statham and John Huddle, had a very simple but direct approach to their business. They wanted to take care of our people and take care of our customers. And that's been in our DNA since day one back in 1986. And at Diversco, you really feel like a family member when you're working with Diversco, not only as an employee, but you can talk to our customers and our vendors, our vendor partners as well. And they feel like when they're a part of this Diversco group, there's something really special going on about Diversco. So what are our core values and why are they so important? The group we have on this call today all understand what core values are. The core values are your DNA in your organization. They're the values that form the foundation, that perform the work we do and how we conduct ourselves every day. Our core values drive our company culture, and whether they're intentional or not, our culture will be created for us. So why did we update our core values at Diversco? In 2013, we had a set of guiding principles that our staff really didn't even know what the guiding principles were. As we added our organization, we acquired new companies, we started trucking businesses, we started to realize there was multiple presidents and owners of companies joining the Diversco group of companies, and everyone had their core values and set principles. And we needed to get on common ground and align our companies so that way our core values or our care that our ownership talked about 34 years ago was being present into the company. So we did a little self-reflection. The organization needed to take a step back. And like Keith talked about in his journey, is that we need to honor your past. So we didn't want to say our guiding principles weren't important, but we wanted to make sure that they were relevant, they were noticeable, and we can actually live those action items and live those values. So we did some self-reflection, and we started to talk to our staff. So our culture is how we live our values and how we get our work done every day, how we make our decisions with our values, how we choose our customers and suppliers, what are the reasons we hire and fire employees. And what we started to notice is as we added more people to the group of companies, we all did that differently, and we all had a different set of standards. So we wanted to make sure that as the owners and leaders of the company, we walk the walk and talk the talk of the care values and the core values that we talked about at Diversco. So how do we develop our core values? We assembled, like Keith said, you need to honor your past. So we assembled a good cross-sectional team from new employees to employees that have been with the company over 25 years. And we started to talk about why the Diversco group of companies was successful and what kind of culture and values we wanted to bring forward to the organization to leave a legacy for the next generation. We had some brainstorming sessions. We spent a lot of time in the boardroom. We did some interviews. We started talking about behaviors that we liked in the organization and ones we didn't want to have here anymore, and what kind of people were capable of driving this forward. We surveyed our entire staff across the country and our location in the US, and we talked about how we're going to build these core values and get their feedback. So then we took some time and we narrowed it down to 5 to 10 values, because we realized in our first go around on the guiding principles, we had 7 guiding principles that when we moved from our old building in 2005 to our new building, the guiding principles ended up on a plaque in a closet that no one could even remember or recognize. So we needed to make it a way that our company was going to remember these values and be able to share those values and use those to guide themselves through decision making. So next, then we unveiled the results. We made a big splash with our team. We had a big conference call. Back then, Zoom wasn't as prevalent, so there was more people on the phone listening to the core values presentation. We made sure we had lots of plaques and mugs, and we did a lot of things to kind of make it really visible to the staff across the company. And the survey said when we looked at what really mattered to Diversco was that our employees really cared about our company. So when we narrowed down our core values, communication, accountability, relationships, and excellence were the 4 that really became prevalent. It was just by a revelation as we had these meetings and brainstorming sessions that I decided that, well, let's use our care as our anchor point and our real basement for our care values. And again, as the ownership said in the past, we want to take care of our people and our customers, and this was a way we could share that and keep it in the DNA of the organization. We were committed to open, honest, respectful communications across all of our relationships. Like Keith said, holding ourselves accountable to ownership, the work we did, and the responsibility for our actions. We do it right the first time. Relationships, John and Bob really focused on their relationships in the beginning of driving key vendor partnerships in the US and in Canada to drive our business with our customers. And we really worked on the small independent mom and pop propane retailers to help drive our business. And those were very family type companies. And that's where the alignment happened with Diversco, is that we were a family distribution business working with family independent propane marketers in Canada, and that alignment and that we had a very common goal as an organization with our customers. So that really drove our business. And then the excellence piece, I think that at that point it was called continuous improvement, but in order to get our care to work, we use excellence as the next core value. We deliver what we promise. We add value that goes beyond what's expected. So that's kind of how we became care values, and we really pride ourselves on that we care about our customers and our vendors and our employees. We've already been able to use this a number of times. I've had some young employees come into my office and say, hey, Corey, to give you an example, one of our key vendors we've been a partner with for 34 years had given us a $30,000 rebate check twice. And the employee came to me and said, Corey, why do we do? Do we keep it? And I said, is that going to help us in our long-term relationship with that vendor? Is that the kind of company we want to be? So we're going to be holding ourselves accountable to a higher level, and we're going to do it right. And we're not going to take that money, and we're not going to sit on that credit. So I look at those core values. That employee walked away, and they knew it was the right thing to do. They were taught a lesson in that process, and it was the reason we were able to move forward in some of these initiatives and with some of these customers. Is that we look to these values to make us stronger. So how do we articulate our values? Again, we do it through leadership. Many companies, we did the plaques, we made mugs, we had wallet-sized cards in our offices. We went around the company and we put care values on the walls. That's only part of the process. Well, we realized it's going to take 2 to 3 years and longer to drive your care values into your organization. We created a Care Connect site, an intranet site, which I'll flip over to right now. And our Care Connect site was built because our care values were about communication and accountability and relationships. We wanted to build something for our staff that's an intranet site that drove company news. It went on their homepage every morning when they log in. We talked about acknowledgments of 25 years service. We talked about social feeds that employees could post. We also had an operations, sales, IT, marketing, and departmental resources at the top of the page that they could access. And we also had this sent out in email notifications when there was changes made to the site, if there was an update. So we really focused on driving internal communication and sharing what the good news stories were in the organization. The other thing we did, I worked with Frank on this program, is that we incorporated a new performance management process. This process, we wanted to, again, individualize our care values to the employee's performance. How we did that is we broke our performance management process down to a communication piece where the employee had a chance to talk about how they felt in the organization, where they wanted to be in the next 5 years, what improvements the organization can make. Some of the questions were around those. Accountability, we created very clear objectives that were time sensitive, measurable, and we had targets, and on a quarterly basis, we reviewed those targets with our employees. We also had a relationship piece in our care values where we talked about relationships in the organization where they wanted to improve that. So they created an objective around relationships. And then the excellence piece, because we care about our employees, we want to make sure that we had a professional development objective as well as a personal objective. It could have been something as simple as running a marathon or doing some training that would help them perform better personally and professionally. So we did a lot of other things when it came to the communication side of things. We created weekly scorecards, again, from the top down. Typically, I wouldn't have to report up to the ownership group on a weekly basis, but to keep myself accountable and to show that the rest of the organization that we're accountable, I shared our weekly scorecard and updated the staff across all departments, what was going on with our organization and how we were performing as a group. Again, we did quarterly business reviews, aligning all of our business leaders once a quarter to talk about, again, every meeting started with our care values. So we drove that message through every quarter and where we were and how relevant they still were to our organization. And then last but not least, we had some town hall meetings at every location when we started the care values to help drive that message. And one other thing I'll bring in here, we actually created a value objective in our performance management system where each employee would pick 1 or 2 care values that they thought they could work on to improve. So even in their individual performance, they were working on their care values. So the DNA was being built as we go. The one thing I can say when I talk to Frank, when we hire or fire an employee, we want to make sure people are capable of living our core values. It's not that we don't believe that you can have different values, but you need to be capable of living our company values. So some key takeaways from this presentation would be your core values are to support your vision of your company and help shape its culture. So making sure that you have the 10 commandments and that you're going to live and breathe those 10 commandments is important. And make sure you share those 10 commandments across the company. The core values need to be embraced and practiced by your team and your leaders, not just the leadership group. When I started this journey, I went to the owners. The first thing I said is, I'm going to go down this journey with the company, but I need your buy-in. I need your support. I need you to live and breathe and talk the talk and walk the walk. So once I had that buy-in, then I realized I can move forward. But we couldn't do that without that information and making sure the leaders were on side. Core values need to be visible and articulated well. We've done our best to try to do that across the organization. Again, it's been in our performance management. It's on our Care Connect site. We're also working on new Office 365 and Teams and SharePoint communication tools to help drive even further in the next year. And our core values need to be challenged and changed over time. One of the revelations I had, I was telling Frank about this whole presentation. Unlike Keith, this is my first roadshow and a corporate presentation outside of Diversco. So I thank you for that, Frank and Ross, for the opportunity. But what I did realize is that our care values, when I asked staff even last week how many core values we had, they said 4. They said communication, accountability, relationships, and excellence. And I said, wow, that's amazing. But I realized in the last week, the care is the core value that started the whole process. And so we really have 5 care values. And I learned something that, you know what, our values can change and they'll change over time. So at Diversco, our people care about the business, they care about themselves and our customers. And I want to say thanks to Frank and Ross for the opportunity. The one thing I will say that in the going forward, being in a COVID-19 time, that the care values are more important today than they ever were. Today, we need to communicate more being remote from home. The virtual workforce has changed the way we do business. The accountability level, people that we had in the office that you could walk out and see what they were working on, today they're working from home. So you need to trust your people and hold them accountable remotely. Relationships that were water cooler conversations, potlucks in the office, all that has changed. Now we need to figure out, I'm working with Frank right now on a virtual culture initiative that's going to help drive virtual culture in our organization, so that we have a hybrid of virtual as well as in-house culture driving future of the organization. So there's a lot of things to think about as we go through COVID-19, but I think if you stay true to your core values and you take those values and you still try to drive those even in times of change, you can still be successful. And I'll say Diversco over the last 8 months since COVID-19, we're at 85% of our budget year to date, and we've improved our company culture just by some of the training initiatives we've done with our sales team, as well as our key partners in the US on some vendor training. So we've been focusing on positive things that help drive the organization forward, and we've kind of tried not to get too caught up in the negative around COVID-19. So we've tried to refocus our organization.
Very good.
That's it for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keith. Corey, this is absolutely fabulous, and it's been a journey that's evolved, and it's been highly successful. So I'll open it up for questions for Corey. If there's any questions at this point in time, or as I say, you can put them into the chat box as well. That works quite well for us.
All right, I have a question, Corey. First of all, excellent presentation. It's really great to hear someone speak from a real experience that they've had about how they've made a change in the culture. And the question that I have is, I believe you mentioned that along the way in the recent past, your organization has acquired other organizations. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And were they involved in this process?
Yes, they were.
So my question is, it'd be interesting to hear, because my experience has been in acquisitions and mergers and what have you. There's some real challenges in getting different cultures to become one. So if you could cite one challenge that you had in doing that with an acquired company and how you overcame it, that might be helpful to know.
Sure. So one of the acquisitions was one of our trucking businesses, and their ownership had left and sold out. So the management team came over to Diversco, and we really sat with that group, and we had to understand what their values were. And they didn't really have a lot of clear value-driven business at the time. So their culture was built, it was still a family type business. So we really had that commonality. So we tried to find that anchor point that we can say, okay, we have some common ground here, so let's build on that. And then we kind of worked through that with that team, and we talked about kind of how we wanted to grow our business and where the vision was for the future. We still have our challenges because we have two trucking business. There's still times where we may have our challenges between leadership, and we try to work through that using our core values. But there are challenges, no question. But I think we have to find the commonalities of this was a family business, yours was a family business. Obviously, your ownership cared about your customers and your employees, and you weren't a number in the organization. And that's the one thing that our challenge at the Diversco is that as we become a $15 to $120 million company in the next few years, how do we make sure our employees feel like they're not just a number in an organization? And I spend a lot of time with video. I do video scorecards even just to have the remote branches see a face from the organization. If they can't get on a Zoom call, I'll send that over via email as a video versus, again, the warehouse staff in Moncton, New Brunswick gets a chance to listen to the president talk about core values, vision, and mission. It's not just his direct report talking about it, and making sure that the message is clear throughout the organization. I think repetition is key, Peter.
Thanks very much. I really pick up on the common ground theme. I think it's an excellent way to build relationships. Actually, always look for that common ground and move from that point. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Very good. Do we have any other questions for Corey?
Sure, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Corey, in implementing your values, it's very impressive. I really appreciated your presentation there. Because I'm a headhunter and do a lot of searching, do you, other than group interviews, do you require, or do you really look into some kind of profile testing to make sure anyone hired is within the box or the realm of being trained to follow this kind of process?
No, we don't formally right now. A lot of times it's our our employees come from referrals of friends and family even sometimes, and we also have to be careful of that approach. But we do have people that get really good references, and they like the Diversco model. Frank has been working with us on some of that as well. But we don't really have a formal personality test or anything like that that we follow to see if they're fit the corporate DNA. We take them through our value core value presentation. We try to get an understanding of where they've come from and look for cues that we can draw out what means to them as an employee for an organization to make sure the fit is good. A lot of times we get a real gut feel of how people are going to behave. It's not too often. I got to say the tenure at Diversco, I think right now is over 15 years, 16 years. Most of our staff have been here. It's nice to get some new blood in the business. Don't get me wrong. We've been working on some succession planning over the last 4 or 5 years with Frank on some key individuals, but people come to Diversco and they typically end up staying at Diversco because of that family feel. So I don't think we have a secret sauce by any means. We know we hire slow and we fire fast is one of our mottos here. When we find somebody that isn't following the core values or are not capable, it's like the old saying, you put the salt shaker in the middle of the table. The employees that keep pulling it off the table, you realize quickly that you don't need those employees to disrupt your culture. So we try to find a way to make sure that we identify that in the first 90 days and we make those changes as quick as possible.
Thank you.
The other thing we've done also too, as we go through the interview process, is we have specific questions around the core values, whether it's on the communication or give us a time when you over and above to deliver to a client. So we've tried to build that into the interview process just to make sure we try and assess that. But as Corey said, as often it's gut feel as well. Very good. Do we have any other questions? Okay, I think we're doing well here. So Corey, that was terrific, and what I appreciate about your presentation is the fact that you have great passion for the work you do, and I think we're all in business together. We all have passion, but I think you really demonstrate that leadership and you put yourself in line. And as we recognize both from your presentation and from Keith's presentation, we're all in this to learn, and that's really what we're here. But so thank you very much for sharing your insights and taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to be here today.
Well, thanks, Frank and Ross. Really appreciate the invite, and thanks for everyone for participating.
Very good, perfect. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Ross for a few closing words.
Well, that was great hearing from both Keith and Corey. Their stories were very insightful. And as a group, we're going to be doing this somewhere in the neighborhood of quarterly. I think our next meeting will be in January. And our goal is to find excellent speakers that have stories to share with our clients and our group that will help them improve their business. The Strategic Partners is a great group of individuals. We all have different talents that we bring to our clients, and our mission is to help our clients move closer to corporate excellence. And corporate excellence to us is maximizing all your different processes and your strengths and eliminate any kind of wastage of money and make sure that your systems are all running efficiently and all the different areas of your business. If each particular area was running at peak performance, I think you can all imagine how much more you would enjoy your business. I know that business is not always a really enjoyable experience. There are some challenges that are very difficult to deal with, and I think COVID-19 has introduced us all to a really significant challenge. And I know that when it started, I felt like I had my head stuck in the sand. I didn't know where to go. And I think that's part of the problem with COVID is that we don't know where it's going. We don't know when it's going to be over. And there's a lot of challenges. And I know that as the strategic partners, when we meet, we have all come to realize that our clients need our help more now than ever before. And that's what we do. We meet with our clients and look for ways to help them improve their business, run more efficiently, and hopefully make more money. And I think making more money has become a significant challenge with COVID-19. And hopefully the things that we're able to deliver to our clients can help you do that. And anyways, that's what we do. The nice thing that we did with this forum is we made a commitment that there would be no selling going on during this process. But I want you to know that if you have recognized someone in our group today that you think would be a benefit to your business, please reach out to me and I'll make sure that the strategic partner that introduced that individual is made aware of that, and we can make proper introductions, because the whole process with the strategic partners is to find interesting ways to help our clients improve their business. And quite often that improvement comes with an introduction to somebody. You know, we've got 36 people in the group today, and I would easily suggest that there's at least 4 people for everybody in this group that could add some form of value to your business. And that's what we do as a group. We work hard at making introductions and finding ways to help our clients become more successful. Our next meeting is going to be in January. This was our first meeting, and it took a lot of effort from our entire group. And special thanks to Keith and Corey for taking their time to speak to us. I've got a couple of really great speakers hopefully lined up. I'm not going to mention their names because I don't have those deals inked yet. But as soon as we choose a date, I'm thinking probably towards the end of January, because it takes a lot of effort communicating with everybody. Every one of you will be invited to our next meeting, and you're more than welcome to attend, and I hope you do. And please reach out to me if there's someone in the group that you'd like to speak further with, because we're all here to help. So thank you very much. Frank, I think we're ahead of schedule. Is that true?
Yes, that's we aim to be efficient. We know everyone on the call has probably 30,000 emails sitting there and phone calls to get to. So with that, we're going to thank everyone, and we appreciate your participation. If there's any feedback, please send it through to Ross. We're happy to receive that, and we believe in learning and helping our clients. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and everyone have a great day. Keep safe and look after each other. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.